On Gathering of the Crows, we discuss subject matters that may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Let's dish.
Everyone considers my story to be true crime, but this book is a work of memory, my memory, and therefore is a memoir, and not an outsider's investigation of my life or crime. The feelings and emotions invoked are accurate. While some of my childhood memories have faded, these particular events remain vivid. To fill many gaps, I've relied on other people's answers to my questions. The typical disclaimers apply. Some names and other details have been changed or omitted to protect the privacy of individuals. Any resemblance between a fictionalized name and a real person is strictly coincidental. Where there are passages containing dialogue, quotations are used when I'm reasonably sure that the speaker's words are close to verbatim or that the speaker's actual meaning is accurately reflected. The story I share here is true to my memory, and these memories have shaped my perceptions, many of which are also shared here. This is how it was for me, what I experienced or believe I experienced.
I mean, I used to always think that maybe she's just a little overprotective. And so if I had to say one word about her, it would be overprotective.
But you knew you could walk.
Yes, sir.
Did you ever say to her, "Mother, I can walk. Why am I in this wheelchair?"
No, sir, I never asked that.
When she wasn't around, did you get up and walk secretly?
I did, yes, sir.
Did she ever catch you walking?
She did a couple times.
And what did she tell you to do?
She got so upset with me, she would punish me so bad. Like, she started hitting me with a coat hanger and telling me all kinds of mean things. She would tell me that she wished she had an abortion when she had the chance, that I ruined her life.
In a warm light, my scars are less jarring than I found them to be in the past. Or maybe time is softening the marks on my body. But sometimes, it's what is not visible that hurts us most. For me, that's true. For all the trauma inflicted on my body since childhood, it's the scar that isn't there that always travels with me. The scar that otherwise would have been there if I hadn't asked Nick to kill my mother. People really want to know, what was the final straw? When was the moment when I decided it was her or me? Here you go, y'all, on page 3. 1 month before the murder, my mother tried to cut my throat. At least, that's how I saw it. The cause of concern, suddenly, was my voice. It's so high-pitched. It's so squeaky. My mother complained to my ear, nose, and throat specialist. I thought my voice was distinct, like my uncommon name. Or maybe it was a family trait to be proud of. We both knew women on my mother's side of the family with similar high-pitched voices. Besides, Nick said my childlike chirp was sexy. So, I didn't understand the issue, and I told my mother so. Never in front of the doctors, of course. I knew better than that. But on the way home, I went on and on, like, well, a squeaky wheel. There's nothing wrong with my voice, I said with a whimper, as she pushed me in my portable wheelchair to the parking lot where our car was parked, outside the hospital in downtown Kansas City.
Way that, people will hopefully want to go buy the book.
I think that, obviously we wanted, and we meaning me and my co-authors, wanted to convey a sense of urgency.
Okay.
Because a lot of people can't put themselves in the mindset of where I was at with the abuse and how desperate I felt. So having a statement like she was going to cut my throat, that statement stands out a lot. And so it transports the readers into my mind and emotion. And so that's why it was so important to kind of say that and then go into the details of what I meant by that.
Right.
This is actually kind of the first time I've been honest. Besides being honest, my attorneys, even that, I haven't been completely honest with them, so.
I want to talk about the night of the murder. Tell me in your own words what happened that night.
Well, really, my mother and I had got into an argument 2 days before. And it was about my feeding tube. I'm like, I no longer need this feeding tube. Can we please have it removed? And she said no. and I had an upcoming surgery, and I didn't want to have it, so I said, please tell the doctor I don't need this surgery. I've had it 20 times before. Why do I have to have it again? When the doctor, she would do all the talking. I'd always have a stuffed animal or a Barbie doll. She'd just tell me, just play with my Barbie doll. I believe there are angels among us, sent down to us from somewhere up above. They come to you and me in our darkest hour.
All right. Welcome to Gathering of the Crows, the podcast where we unravel complicated cases in deep dive investigations. Our first case is a doozy. Today we're examining the web of lies, distortions, and half-truths that have shaped one of the most sensationalized murder cases in recent history, the murder of Dee Blanchard, and the media-driven fairy tale that followed. I'm Fancy, your host, and for the last 8 years, I have been knee-deep in this case. I even worked directly with the Blanchards until I realized I was being lied to. My mission is simple: exposing the truth.
Hello, I'm Mac, and I come from a background in addiction, recovery, and let me just tell you, the level of manipulation in this case is something else. I've been catching up fast, and every new detail makes you wonder what really happened.
In this first episode, we're diving into the author's note and chapter 1 of Gypsy Rose Blanchard's new book, My Time to Stand. We're peeling back the layers of how her story is being rewritten in real time and why you should be questioning everything you think we know. Before we dive in, we'd like you to visit our website to view our online memorial and vigil page dedicated to Dee Blanchard, a space for respectful remembrance. We're also planning live Q&A sessions and local vigil events over the coming months. All right, let's start with Gypsy's author's note. Listen to this excerpt. Everyone considers my story to be true crime, but this book is a work of memory, my memory, and therefore is a memoir and not an outsider's investigation of my life or crime. The feelings and emotions evoked are accurate. While some of my childhood memories have faded, these particular events remain vivid. To fill in my gaps, I've relied on other people's answers to my questions.
So right from the start, she's given herself an excuse. It's as if she's saying, if something isn't accurate, don't blame me, it's just my memory. This built-in loophole sets a stage for all the inconsistencies to come.
Exactly. And when you consider that Christie and her friend Vicky encouraged Gypsy to write this book as therapy, it raises serious concerns. Writing a memoir as a way to process repressed memories isn't how actual trauma therapy works. It can lead to a reconstructed narrative that benefits the storyteller rather than reflecting objective truth. Another key admission from the author's note is where there are passages containing dialogue, quotation marks are used when I'm reasonably sure that the speaker's words are close to verbatim or that the speaker's actual meaning is accurately reflected.
In other words, I made it up. When you say you're reasonably sure, quotes, you're leaving room for being reasonably wrong.
And yet Gypsy is already walking back parts of her own book. She's mentioned in interviews that she was too busy with her reality show to proofread, and now she wants to do a rewrite. Remember, she recorded the audiobook herself. So how does she not know what's in her book? The print version and the audio version don't even match in some parts. This is classic gaslighting, constructing a narrative that lets her say, that's just what I was told, if challenged. So I really feel this author's note is going to set the precedent for exactly what we thought was going to happen in this book. She is basically setting it up in a way where she absolves herself again of any accountability, any changing stories. It's just my memory. It's how I perceive things. And when we begin diving in, this was what was the indication for me of the way that I began to feel that I truly believe she believes her own lies. I think that she feeds her lies to herself. She convinces that herself that this is how it really happened. And so therefore she does not see herself as lying because she truly believes what she's saying.
She's convinced.
But then the next suggestive thing comes into her head from whatever outside influence or whatever memory she's trying to like convey weirdly, as she usually does, and I feel like I'm seeing a real sense of delusion here. And you're going to see that right off the bat in chapter 1.
I am too, and I'm also seeing, again, a lack of accountability.
Yes.
So if I get it wrong, don't hold me accountable. It's just the way I remember it. She's always avoiding being held accountable.
Right. And so you'll see throughout the book that not only does she try to absolve herself of any accountability, responsibility, or any real basis in actual facts and evidence, she also does it for Rod and Christie. She makes excuses for anyone who's around her. She even goes so far as to being like, before she said the doctors are lying, they're doing this, they're covering their own butts. And before that, she had said, she did remember talking to them. Then she doesn't remember talking to them. And now she's chalking it up to like, oh, it's just human error. So she's basically laying it all on solely Dee Dee alone. And again, I'm beginning to see, especially as we go forward into this next chapter, you're going to hear her talk about this, according to her, final inciting incident, which is not the final inciting incident that we've ever heard before. It's a new one. And we dove deep into that because the way that she talked about it, and also the way that she talked about it when she was doing promos, such as
Hale Lowry's podcast, Barely Famous.
She did that podcast and she's immediately talking about how in this first section, she had to get the reader's attention and she wanted to do it in a way that was just so grappling and visceral and getting them to realize how horrible this was for her. Meanwhile, the event she's describing didn't even take place. But in her mind, I think she's convinced herself it happened.
She made it up in her head.
Yes. And I think she believes her delusions. And part of that problem is because there's no one holding her accountable. Christie and Rod don't encourage her to be better or behave better or any of those things. I mean, hell, Christie's running right along with her, causing the drama next to her.
Yeah.
It's sad. Unfortunately, this book, which I don't think was a good move for her. I really do not think that the people around her have her best interest at heart.
No.
They do not guide her towards a better reality, a better life, any of those things. And it's very dangerous now since there's a baby involved. She's still denying her medical conditions. She's still trying to deny her microdeletion by not having it in her audiobook, but it's in the scripted version of her book. Like, it's just, I think that we're really watching someone that has no real reality. And that's where I found a certain amount of compassion for the child who was created out of all of this.
Right.
She was an innocent child when she was born. Whether it's nurture versus nature, whether some of these things were predestined or she was predisposed to be like this in certain ways, it all boils down to that the people around her, including her mother, did not get her the right help that she needed for the mental side of this. The 1Q21 microdeletion comes with its own beginnings of, cognitive dissidence. It's got cognitive delays, behavioral delays, emotional delays. It's linked to autism, ADHD, schizophrenia, bipolar. So, I mean, it already comes packed with a bunch of things. On top of that, I'm seeing a very, very, allegedly, in my opinion, for entertainment educational purposes only, I'm seeing these cluster B personality disorders really showing through. And, there's a big debate as to whether those come packed in your body or if nature and nurture, how do those form?
Right.
A lot of it comes from trauma. And we have to look at the fact that, yes, she was an innocent child and she was sculpted into what we see today.
100%. Which means if Gypsy is relying on other people's recollections to fill in the gaps for her, she's literally building a false memory network. And that's why repressed memory therapy is so controversial.
Exactly. Techniques like hypnosis and guided imagery have been shown to sometimes implant false memories rather than recover actual events. So, if Gypsy's book is based on memories filled in by others, it's hard to separate fact from fiction. And I really think that this is where Christie plays a huge part in this, because Christie has her own motivations for rewriting history,
Right.
and rewriting the narrative. Because if she can convince Gypsy that her and Rod were they were kept away and they were the great parents that loved her from afar, and all these different things, and Christie has a personal vendetta against Dee Dee Blanchard, and always has, according to sources on the Bayou.
Right.
So she's got her own motivations in this, and I don't think that Gypsy realizes that, this is not, Christie's motives are not pure.
No.
I don't think that Gypsy is still being manipulated by these people. The same people who failed to protect her in the first place are continuing to exploit her now. And that is why Christie is so upset with me, because I called her out and said that she was worse than Dee Dee. And in my opinion, she is. She has pushed this false narrative. She has gone after every freaking money grab you could possibly get, every TV show, every network, every interview. And in fact, when Gypsy and Rod told her that they didn't want her doing it anymore, she pushed me to do them, giving me every single freaking interview request and telling me that I was now the official spokesperson. That's how I became PR. It wasn't something that I just said I would do. I did offer services based on the contract we had signed to work on all of this. But that was beyond the scope of that. I did that because I was helping Christie,
Mm-hmm. Yep. And here's the kicker. Gypsy was heavily encouraged to write this book as a form of therapy instead of working with a trained trauma therapist. And that's a little dangerous because it blurs the lines between genuine memory and a manufactured narrative.
And what is, so Mac, I know you've done a lot of work in recovery, and they kind of go through some of these things with you and bringing up taking responsibility and accountability for past offenses and those things. So I'm sure you've dealt with some of this kind of like going back over a narrative. And so what do you think is very important about making sure that when you're recalling these things that they're accurate?
Because you need to address it, head on. If it's something that's, I feel like if it's something that's in your past and it's a reason why you are the way you are and it's affecting your life, then you have to directly, and it has to be as honest and truthful as possible.
Yeah,
because
I can see that.
otherwise, what's the point in you know what I mean? There's no
In
point.
other words, you're not doing the work.
Exactly. You have to do the work. And
Right.
like I said, it's daily, it's every day. There's really not a lot of people out there who work a 12-step program, and it really could be for anybody. It does not just have to be for AA or, anybody else, really anybody could use it. But
Yeah, the
yeah.
12-step program is very, I think it's very cathartic. I think it is great for dealing with past traumas and all those kinds of things. Like,
Hmm.
because it forces you to really attack and face your fears, your worst parts of you, all the things that make up who you've become today, all the traumas, all the joys, everything. It's really kind of looking back through all of that and saying, okay, I take responsibility for the person I've been and for the person I'm going to be.
Hmm. You
Yeah.
have to face it. You have to face it. And it's not always easy and it's very painful
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot of times. And you have to allow yourself to feel that because you can't heal unless you feel it.
Yeah. And
Uh,
I don't think there's a lot of people out there that are willing to sometimes go through that amount of revisiting trauma again,
right, right. I'm not saying it's easy because it isn't.
Yeah.
It isn't. Like I said, I'll be 54 next month and I'm still working on things
Yeah.
daily.
Yeah.
Um, but like I said, if she was just get honest and just realize, and the
Hmm.
people around her also, just hold her accountable. Don't say things to her like she got what she deserved, or I'm not
Right.
going to tell you what you did was wrong, or what you did was very wrong. It was very
Right.
wrong.
And she's been given a chance that her co-conspirator has not been given,
Mm-mm.
and that to me is she should have seized that. She should have done the work over the last 10 years of this, and instead we've seen this dumpster fire that has come out and encouraged dumpster fire by the people around her. So when your recollections, though, are constantly filled in by others, you end up with a story that feels real to you but isn't necessarily factual. And
Right.
that's where the credibility of My Time to Stand begins to unravel. So, before moving into chapter one proper, let's be clear. I once believed all of Gypsy's lies were consciously crafted to cover up her crime. But looking at her story through the lens of mental health, it's a lot more complex. I do suspect underlying personality disorders, specifically histrionic personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. These may be distorting her perception of reality. I believe she's convinced herself of the version of events that benefits her regardless of the actual truth.
Right. Her memories may not be reliable, making it hard to tell which parts are blatant lies and which are distortions born of trauma. These are a huge difference between intentional deceit and genuinely believing something that never happened.
Right. And that's why understanding repressed memory therapy is so important. If Gypsy was pushed to write this book as a means of healing rather than through proper therapy, her narrative could very well be a blend of truth and memory distortions, fabricated details that serve her emotional needs. And once media picks up the story, they run with it, regardless of accuracy.
This investigation is part of a broader campaign aimed at exposing every deliberate omission in this manipulated narrative. Over the next year, we will bring you live Q&A sessions of local visual events as part of our ongoing effort to challenge the profit-driven story being sold to the public.
All right. So now that we've laid the groundwork, let's move forward. Up next, we'll dive into My Time to Stand and start breaking down Gypsy's actual words. Buckle up, because things really start to get messy from here.
And remember, this isn't just Gypsy's personal account. It's a carefully crafted narrative meant to shape public perception. We've seen her story change over the years, and this book is no different. Every word is intentional, every omission is deliberate.
And that's true. Like, I think that this was very carefully crafted. Um, the over sensationalism of everything, the over sexualization of
The
everything,
metaphors.
the metaphors, it's all made to create
Whew,
this really big picture that I think she feels she's driving home. But what we really see in this book is there's no timeline of events. The stories don't add up or they don't complete. You can see the difference in these stories versus additional stories from even right now. Like if she goes and does another interview right this minute, she'll tell you totally different stories than she put in her
something different.
books. It,
Yeah,
it's always a contradiction with her, and I really feel it's her justification to herself because she just refuses to actually face what she did.
right. And
Um,
if she tells different stories, no one will ever figure out what the real one is.
That's right. Right. The
You
more
know,
she just lies and the more she distorts the truth, the further away from any real semblance of it there is. And if the media just keeps running with this,
just the throw off. Yep.
there's nothing like it's very hard because the media has chosen its narrative and they will not come off of it. Like
They
I know
will not.
one of your things is that you want to change the words a victim of Munchausen by proxy. You want that eradicated
Absolutely.
from
100%.
all media because it's
From
not
everywhere.
true.
From
It's just not
everywhere.
true.
Because it's not, yeah, it's not, it's a misrepresentation of what happened and of Dee Dee. Like, seriously, the way she keeps getting villainized is just,
And nobody's saying that Dee Dee was the perfect person. Like Dee Dee had
no.
problems. Okay, I do believe that Dee Dee probably had some amount of mental health issues. That has been suggested in some of her medical records that we have.
Hmm.
I do believe that she was taught, just like she taught Gypsy, how to skirt the systems, and some of that was done out of need and necessity, but also out of habit that this family has been doing for years and years and years and years.
Right.
It's
Right.
taught to them. It's a culture, and I feel like this villainization of Dee Dee is just vicious and cruel for no reason, and I really feel a lot of that is fueled by Christie.
I think it might be because, poor Dee Dee's not even here to say her side of anything. The only side we get is Gypsy's side. That's it. And
Right.
I do,
Wait, right. We don't even have her family standing up for her, which is a whole nother situation that we'll be highlighting as we go through these pieces of just dissecting her book and putting out our other podcast and our books. We will be looking at the full picture here. So, but this does bring us to a reoccurring theme in her writings: the over dramatization of her own health. Gypsy has built a narrative where her physical scars are evidence that her body was stolen from her. Consider this quote: "Without salivary glands and teeth, thanks to unnecessary surgeries and medications, my past will always puncture my present."
that's a powerful line, but is it accurate? Or is it part of a larger self constructive narrative where she keeps pushing the notion that my mother stole my body from me?
Yeah, because here's where it gets complicated. While Gypsy claims her medical treatments were abuse, the truth is her genuine health issues are due to a chromosome disorder, the 1q21.1 microdeletion, which explains her condition. There's no evidence of medical child abuse here. Instead, Dee Dee's manipulation twisted the facts to serve a dramatic narrative.
Exactly. And at times she blames the doctors for covering for Dee Dee, and at other times she dismisses their actions as human error. It's this flip flopping only deepens the mystery of what truly did happen.
Right. And it's important to note that Gypsy's over dramatization likely stems for her deep need for attention and validation, exasperated by the effects of her 1q21 microdeletion. This genetic condition affects cognition, impulse control, and emotional regulation. And when combined with traits of HPD and NPD, it creates a perfect storm for a distorted self image.
And it's not just about physical scars. She's leaving psychological marks on those around her. This isn't simply about medical malpractice, it's about controlling the narrative, about victimhood, and about getting the attention she so desperately craves.
Yeah, and I think that that partially, was ingrained in her through her mother. Her mother, for all intents and purposes, what I see with Dee Dee is that Dee Dee was in a bad situation with a deadbeat father who started working a system to survive and take care of a very sick child. And I think that she might have got caught up with some doctors that maybe overbill, overdo things, but nobody was actually doing anything physically to Gypsy to cause her to be worse or any of those things. They were just, kind of pushing this narrative. And
Hmm.
I think that that attention seeking comes from that because she was the golden child. She was in Special Olympics and she was a poster child for this and she was at every charity event and she got up there and sang horribly, and like the attention she fed off the constant attention from her mother. Then she's also missing the attention from her father in meaningful ways. We've
I'm
got
she's
daddy issues
smiling.
coming in
Every
here.
picture I see in her, she's smiling.
Exactly. And she enjoyed it. I think she enjoyed,
I think he truly loved her. I
yes.
think she did try to give her the best life that she could.
Yep.
She's not a perfect mom.
No,
None of us were.
no.
You do with what you try to do better than what your own parents did, and just keep
Yeah.
getting better.
Yeah.
I don't think she. I don't think she mistreated her as far as medically.
No, I don't
I think
either.
she really was trying to find out what was wrong with her.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that by the time she realized how her overindulgence and realizing that Gypsy was going to live a longer life than maybe the doctors had originally informed her of, I think she realized a little too late that she hadn't attended to things that she maybe should have attended to. There were warning signs, there were red flags all along the way about this behavior, this violent behavior, this impulse
Right.
behavior, these tall tale stories that she was creating all along.
And
And
it's like how do we not know that it wasn't Gypsy that was making her illness seem to be more than what it was to get the attention of Rod?
it is listed in her medical records that she herself was malingering on many occasions by different departments.
Is it that desperation for her dad? Was that what that was about? No, I wonder.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, I could see that because I definitely think there was a wanting to get an attention from daddy in all of this. I think there's many times throughout the stories that she sent sexual pictures to her father. She made comments about him online and then blamed it on others, and she raged at him and then she would come back. It's all the things we've seen all along the line ways, but it was directed at Rod. And now, since the murder and ending up in prison and going through all of this and reconnecting with him, there is this absolute just need to make sure that he is somehow seen in a good light, and her mother is just the ultimate villain here.
Oh my god, like Dee was just the worst ever.
Yeah. And
I mean, everybody, and it's still to this day when I see the picture of them arm in arm, smiling ear to
right.
ear beside that "Mommy, Dead, and Dearest" poster. I'm just, it blows my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
It blows my.
And that's what we see in her interviews in her book. She portrays herself as the helpless victim of a master manipulator, her mother, while also paradoxically manipulating her own story to justify her actions.
Now let's return to one of the most debated moments: the neck wound. Gypsy claims that 1 month before the murder, her mother tried to cut her throat, or at least that's how she saw it. But when we analyze the details, there's significant uncertainty. Could this be a symbolic act, a final mark meant to sever the ties to her past?
fact that she qualifies it with, at least that's how I saw it, suggests it might not be straightforward factual event, but rather her interpretation molded by years of manipulation. This raises the question, is the dramatic portrayal of that moment a deliberative narrative tool rather than objective truth?
Right. While further investigation is needed for definitive answers, the motive behind this act seems to align with Gypsy's history of dramatic reenactments, an attempt to control her story at any cost.
Right. And here's the thing. This story did not take place this way.
There is irrefutable proof that we will be bringing forward.
To show you when this actual event took place, what was the actual thing that she was having done, and it happened. It happened in 2009. The
Mm-hmm.
original story she told people was something to do with her feeding tube, and when she sat on Dr. Phil, she talked about the fact that it was a procedure she'd had done so many times before. None of
Yeah.
that aligns with this story she's talking about. And in my opinion, she's saying here, because I think it ties into the placement of Dee Dee's neck wound and in a kind of a symbolic fashion. Um,
I wonder.
and it really sounds like, she goes hard into the thing about it's the most vulnerable part of your body. She talks about how the scars from the salivary glands being cut out had been
And it
brutal.
really makes me stop to think, like, was it her that did the neck wound on Dee Dee?
I mean, it's definitely a possibility. We've always thought that Nicholas was covering for her in some ways. He's always said he didn't
Mm-hmm.
let her go in there, but we know that that can't be true because she wouldn't have taken the
But
money out of the safe. She's given different accountings of what she saw, what she did, where she cleaned up. So I think that I'm wondering if we've got all kinds of things that we can talk about the crime scene and how we don't think it matches with the version of events that we've been given. But I would say that I think there is a great possibility that that neck wound had to do with her as a final, like, you did this to me kind of delusion. And then she throws the Barney up there for comfort.
mm-hmm.
It's just cold.
Yeah, and creepy, to be
It
honest.
is. Yeah.
Okay, so next, let's address her physical scars. Gypsy claims, without salivary glands and teeth, thanks to unnecessary surgeries and medications, my past will always puncture my present. Now, for me, she uses this line to support the idea that my mother stole my body from me. But where is the accountability for the doctors? Why hasn't anyone questioned how these medical professionals failed to flag what she describes as abuse?
And she's flipped her stance multiple times, accusing doctors of covering for Dee Dee on one hand and dismissing their actions as human error on the other. Notably, no medical fraud charges were filed against Dee Dee. If there had been any evidence of fraud, Medicaid would have prosecuted, and they would have prosecuted the doctors as well. This absence suggests her claims of abuse are more a product of narrative manipulation than fact.
And then there's Dr. Steele. On Prison Confessions and 2020, he claimed he never received Gypsy's files from Louisiana. Yet records show he had them within a month of Gypsy's arrival in Missouri. He even pretended not to know she was consulting with multiple specialists, even though he was responsible for referring her. His claim that he alerted CPS is contradicted by official reports stating the tip came from an anonymous female caller. It appears he spun this story to protect himself as the hospital began questioning Gypsy's constantly shifting birth dates.
Right. And shortly after CPS gets involved, Steele and Dr. Beckerman, her longtime pomologist who saw her in both Louisiana and Missouri conveniently, moved Gypsy's
Mm-hmm.
care from Springfield back to Kansas City in 2009, almost as if they needed to get ahead of further scrutiny. Meanwhile, Gypsy never acknowledges her own role in perpetuating these inconsistencies, instead portraying herself as entirely helpless. And the thing with
Mm-hmm.
Steele is I had always kind of suspected something was wrong with him, because he's the one who continues to chart muscular dystrophy, despite the fact that he has the test results from Louisiana that says it's not muscular dystrophy. Then Dr.
Right.
Flasterstein in 2007, he sends her to Dr. Flasterstein. She sees him twice. Dr. Flasterstein becomes suspicious because he's not understanding the chromosome disorder yet, because it had only been discovered and actually made a real chromosome deletion that they identified 1 year earlier. So nobody knew about
Right.
this deletion yet. They just knew that
Mm-hmm.
she had some sort of chromosome disorder. And muscular dystrophy is a chromosome disorder, and it could
Yeah.
have
Right.
explained a lot of her physical conditions. So,
So I could see why you're looking into that.
right. So he writes back saying that he's worried about the mother's not a good historian, and that there's a possible. This is the only time it's ever mentioned a suspicion, a possible suspicion of
Mm-hmm.
Munchausen by proxy. Dr. Steele immediately does not send her back to any neurologist for 2 whole years. He
Mm-hmm.
does not alert CPS. He does not do any of the things he would do as a mandated reporter. And I want you to understand, in 2009, she is not 18 years old yet. So if he had done things thinking that he was somehow seeing some sort of, kidnapping or Munchausen by proxy or any of the things that he should have done as a mandatory reporter, he might
Right.
have been able to stop all of this from continuing. And maybe Gypsy could have got the help that she needed as well to fully understand her disorder. Because in 2014, she does admit to Aaliyah in text messages, not only does she have the disorder, when they discovered it, and that it does in fact explain all, and she uses the word all, of her
Right.
medical
Right.
conditions, but she's
Mm-hmm.
strong and she knows that she can overcome. Meanwhile, she was already plotting Dee Dee's murder for 3 years.
It's like, right, and it's a good headspace that you're going to overcome. I get that. I have RA,
Right.
so I try to live my life as like I have it doesn't have me type thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, meanwhile, like you said, she's planning to off her
Right.
mom. you know it's like
Yeah.
I would have wanted to learn everything I could about what this is that I have.
Right. And I think that Dee Dee at that point was already in a state of fear. Her daughter was
I think
way out of control, and
I
I
think so.
think that we're looking at this in a system that, here's the thing, like Dr. Steele and Dr. Beckerman, if they had made, logical, if they had acted appropriately as the doctors that they were supposed to be, including Dr. Flasterstein, who was also a mandatory reporter and was told, in his accounting, he says that he was told by other medical staff, maybe perhaps Steele and Beckerman, that to handle her and her mother with kid gloves, and that nobody would believe him if he went and, put forward this Munchausen by proxy story, which makes me wonder, what were they fucking trying to cover up from him exposing? But in my mind, Dee Dee continuing to say my daughter has muscular dystrophy. If you look at the idea that Dee Dee still had no understanding until 2011 what was wrong with her child, I can
Right.
understand maybe in 2001 they told her it wasn't muscular dystrophy and she just didn't accept that. And I see that in a way because when she went to Flasterstein, she actually lists, I think she might have muscular dystrophy. I think she's got cerebral palsy. And he took that as her saying she absolutely has them. I don't think it was that. I think she still was truly trying to understand. And because no one could give her a better explanation, she just kept
Right.
saying, I think my daughter has muscular dystrophy. I think my daughter is this, because no one was giving her any answers. In 2011, she gets the answers that she's been looking for. And what does she do? She tells them, I'm no longer interested in pursuing any other diagnoses. Thank you very much. She's stable. I'm scared to death of her, by the way. And I don't want to drive to freaking Kansas City 2 hours from my home anymore. And this girl is completely out of control. And she's doing her own scam. She's running around. I can't control her anymore. I'm done. Like Dee Dee was done. She was sick.
Yeah.
She was not in good health. She just wanted to be done with it. And I don't think that Gypsy wanted that in any way, shape, or form. Yeah.
She didn't want to have that burden of taking care of
her mother, despite the fact that her mother spent, 23 years of her life doing nothing but caring for her child. She had no life. She had no friends. She had no outside interactions other than the Vigicon people, and that was all for who? Gypsy. She talks about not being freaking socialized, but girl, you did more than 3-4 other freaking normal kids, much less a sick kid in your life.
Oh.
Let's shift. So now let's shift focus to guardianship. In 2009, when the hospital questioned Gypsy's changing birth dates, they requested a court-ordered guardianship. However, her lawyer maintained that Gypsy was competent enough to sign her own medical forms. And I want you to understand that. A lawyer said, no, if we take this to court, they're not going to uphold this. She's competent enough to sign her own medical forms. That's a lawyer who, just didn't want to get paid for taking it to court? No. He's telling her, I can't win this case. She's not incompetent. She knows what she's doing. So when asked if the surgery could proceed while Dee Dee awaited guardianship, the surgeon agreed. But the anesthesiologist refused unless Gypsy signed for herself or Dee Dee was granted some sort of court-ordered guardianship.
And guess what? Gypsy signed her own anesthesia forms. She even granted Dee Dee temporary power of attorney in case something went wrong. This directly contradicts her later portrayal of complete helplessness and reinforces the idea that she was an active participant in constructing her narrative.
Exactly. And she does sign these forms and she does grant her mother the power of attorney, which means that she knew both of those things, which she has lied about both. Her mother did not have a power of attorney over her that was drawn up and somehow she could just present it to law enforcement and they would just believe her. No. They had questioned all of this in 2009 when they came out. They had offered her a way out. She chose to stay with her mother. She chose to continue doing the things that she wanted to do. She had dental surgeries. She needed those. She had eye surgeries. She needed those. Right. She's and so in this situation, what's really funny about this story is this ties into a second story that she talks about is this last thing that her mother was going to do, this last straw. She doubles down and she begins to tell people that her mother told her that she was a big girl and she did not need anesthesiology to have this horribly, invasive procedure done and that she would just have to suffer through it because she's a big girl now. That's not what happened. That didn't happen. What happened was the anesthesiologist said, hey, I'm not doing this unless you sign for it yourself or I've got some court order. And guess what? She signs for it herself. Yep. And she now creates some narrative about her mother requiring her to have this horrible procedure that boils down to a scope through your freaking nose. And we're going to get to that as we really dive into what was this medical procedure and when did it happen.
That she was trying to portray as a knife coming to her neck. Okay. Yeah.
Yes. And cutting her neck open. Meanwhile, she was never in any danger of anything like that. All. This was a simple routine procedure. And when it happened in 2009, it was performed by her longtime freaking pulmonologist, Dr. Beckerman, and it was done while she was in dental surgery for cavities and crowns and other things that they were trying to still save her crumbling teeth so that she wouldn't have to be put under anesthesia more times than she needed to be. But remember, she's been under anesthesia, folks, over 100 times.
And
You've got to
P.S.
be kidding me
P.S.
with that.
Exploratory does not mean unnecessary.
Right.
If anything,
It
it
means,
means the opposite of that.
if anything, it means, hey, we're going to check this out so we can figure out why there
Yeah,
might be a
we got to
problem.
figure out
Because at
what's
the time
going
that
on.
they did it, so they were trying, at the time that this happened, they very much would have been trying to understand what could have been causing not only just her high pitched voice, but several other problems she was having with breathing, respiratory, her throat, all those
Right.
things, the salivary glands, everything. It still was not, despite all the things that they had done, she was still having severe problems. And so in 2009, when they do that test, it is completely 100% logical what they're looking for. And here's the thing. She tries to put that high-pitched voice over onto Dee Dee's side. I don't know if you've ever spoken to any of Dee Dee's family. I certainly have, a lot of them. They don't have high-pitched voices. They are in the lower register when they speak. You know who does have high-pitched voices? Women on Rod's side. So again, here she is trying to absolve Rod's side of any culpability in this. No, he's absolutely not the one who gave this to me. She even goes further into doubling down on Kale Lowry's freaking podcast again. Where she's like, oh no, we don't know if my mother had it or not. Yes, we do. There's medical evidence your mother was tested. Yes, we know that your sister and your brother look like you in the face, and those facial features are indicative of this disorder. We also
Correct.
know that your
Yep.
great grandmother looks exactly freaking like you on Rod's side, sounds like you, had the same issues as you, was the same almost height as you. But yet you still cannot allow any type of error or accountability or responsibility be put onto Rod or your beloved stepmother, Christie. It is absolutely just a villainization of epic proportion. It's all a part of how they just keep villainizing her while absolving themselves of any type of responsibility for any of this. Even the doctors now are being absolved. Like,
Yeah.
if you really believe that you were medically abused, dude, I would have been going for those doctors from day
It
one,
wouldn't
and
have
I
stopped.
tried
Yeah.
to. I encouraged it, and
Right.
nobody will take the case. That's complete bullshit. I had an attorney in Louisiana that handles those types of cases, who was a dear friend of mine, that said, have him call me. Did Christie freaking return his phone calls? No. And
Nope.
statute of limitations had not run out at that point. So they just don't they're not going to take any accountability from themselves. It's just all really convenient to just throw back onto Dee Dee. And it's sickening, to be honest with you. It's
Yeah.
actually very sickening that she cannot, for the life of her, look and see anything good about her mother in her warped brain.
Right. When that's all
And
she
no
keeps
one is
saying is
encouraging
that
her
how
to
her
do that.
mom was her best friend. Now her mom was like the most evil person ever.
Right. And she keeps doubling down and doubling down and doubling down and doubling down. Like, it's not bad enough to tell the story this way. Now I got to tell it this way. And now I got to victimize her that way. And now I got to
All
tell this
you have to
unbelievable
do
shit.
is pay attention.
Like,
Just pay attention.
yeah.
I mean, CPS did go there. CPS did speak with her. What did CPS say? That Gypsy was putting it on.
They also said that Gypsy obviously had some sort of cognitive and developmental delays. She
There you go.
does.
There you go.
There you go. They investigated it. That's what they found, and
But
they
man,
gave her every option to legally leave. She continued to keep signing the documents for her own freaking care and running her own freaking scams. So, it's upsetting that they have villainized Dee Dee in a way that there is nobody to refute it.
Right.
Not even her family.
No.
Like, it's horrible.
It
and
is.
It's infuriating.
It sucks because they all feel, the Petries do. They feel, I can't remember which documentary it was in, but they felt like, yeah, she was mommy's favorite. And I'm sure there was a little sibling rivalry there. I'm sure there was.
Right. There is a deep-seated resentment between all of them and her, and you can hear it in the sound clips of each documentary and each thing that
Yeah.
they've done.
Oh,
And
yeah.
if you weren't around when it played out on Facebook, everybody's like, oh, they've never had a chance. No, 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 they've been around the entire time, spewing their visceral hate
I would
for
have been fighting from the very beginning.
yeah, just to take Gypsy's word for all of this, you know, how much do you have to hate your sister for that? And
Right.
I have looked and looked and looked and looked, and I do not understand, other than sheer jealousy, why they do not like Dee Dee as much as they don't like Dee Dee. Because they can't come up with not one story. Like I said, sisters, sibling rivalry, all those things happen in families. Even,
Sure.
you hate your sister, you don't talk to her anymore, all that shit,
Right.
right?
Right.
But you can still sit down and recall one, I mean, one moment of one time that you were like, oh God, that was a good day with Dee Dee. That was fun. Or she was so great about yada yada. You can find something. You can't come up with one positive fucking story in 10 freaking years. Be so for fucking real. Jeannie has been villainized and victimized by everyone.
You're hugging her and smiling or kissing her or something,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't find one good thing to say about her?
Nope. No, not one good thing. So, before we move further into chapter 1, I think this is a perfect time to address a critical aspect, and that's Gypsy's potential underlying personality disorder. In my opinion, and I have been going to school for forensic psychology, and this has been the case that I have been using as, my case studies for almost all of my classes. I've discussed this with my teachers, my other colleagues, and other people in the profession of psychology that have degrees, advanced degrees, and I believe that there are clear signs of histrionic personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder in her narrative. Now, HPD, which is histrionic personality disorder, is characterized by attention-seeking behavior, dramatization, and a deep need for validation, while
Mm.
NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, involves self-importance and an inability to accept responsibility. And these disorders often go hand in hand.
I was just going to say that there could be a lot of overlapping there.
Yes.
So these traits might explain why Gypsy's story keeps shifting. Rather than just lying, I feel like she's beginning to believe in a version of events that serves her emotional needs. A delusion fueled by genuine trauma and compounded by her 1Q21.1 microdeletion syndrome, which affects cognition, impulse control, and emotional regulation. When you combine these factors, you get a dangerous mix that blurs the line between fact and self constructed fiction.
Exactly. And I think we see this my opinion is the HPD is very, very prominent, from what I'm seeing. This need for attention, the need to make up stories, even the obsession with a baby and this fairy tale romance. It's all part of these kind of like mental dysfunctions.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just theoretical. For instance, on Dr. Phil, she claimed that a feeding tube incident had happened repeatedly. She said it occurred 100 times, but her medical records from 2009 indicate that she only underwent a single laryngoscopy.
Right.
This routine procedure was performed by her long-term pulmonologist, Dr. Beckerman, during dental surgery, as I said before. And moreover, the newly released discovery text between Gypsy and Aaliyah, like we said, confirmed that she acknowledges having this 1Q21 microdeletion, which is responsible for her health issues. This clear evidence contradicts the dramatic retelling in her book, demonstrating her narrative is constantly being rewritten.
Right. And speaking of Dr. Phil, I just want to say, he stands on doing his homework. Okay? And he did not do his homework when it came to Gypsy Rose. And he's one of
No,
the biggest platforms out there to get
yes,
the right story out there.
right.
So if Dr. Phil, if you're listening, you suck at doing your homework. Okay?
Well, it's
just
not
him.
even just that. He not only sucked at doing the homework, he spoon fed her the fucking narrative.
He certainly did. I mean,
And it was like, he's feeding it to her, and she's like, yeah, that's it. She's playing it up, and for a man that prides himself on being able to cut through the bullshit,
like,
dude, were
he
you
missed it.
willingly participating in the bullshit, Dr. Phil, or are you seriously that unqualified to make any type of diagnosis
Lost
or
a
any
shit
type
ton of
of
credibility,
evaluation of someone such as herself?
right?
I was appalled by how that interview went.
I
Looking back at it, and then he doubles down and does this horrific, over dramatic, over sensationalized, almost just like painting Nicholas as this just demented soul that just preyed on Gypsy in this horrific. I mean, it is the most campy bullshit fucking podcast I've ever heard. And I've heard some doozies. So I'm sorry, Dr. Phil, buddy, you need to do your homework, and you want everyone fixed but you. That's what my husband likes to say about Dr. Phil. That's his quote for Dr. Phil. And in this situation, Dr. Phil, I think that you dropped the motherfucking ball.
He dropped it big time.
You just drop it. It rolled away, landed in the freaking in the river, and rolled on into the landfill.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. But the inconsistencies are not just minor errors. They reveal a profound inability to separate fact from fabrication, suggesting that, her narrative may be as much a product of self deception as it is of external manipulation.
Right. And then you throw in Christie and everybody else that's fighting for their own motivations in all of this, and it is just a storm of just crazy chaos. So
chaos.
So now let's delve into one of the most critical aspects of My Time to Stand. Gypsy's account of her conversations with Nicholas Godejohn before the murder. In earlier interviews, she admitted to planning the murder and orchestrating how it would happen. But in her book, she presents herself as a passive participant, a victim manipulated, again, like you said, by external forces.
That contradiction is stark. Every text message, police interview, and prior statement suggest that Gypsy was much more involved than she now lets on. If she's softening her role to fit the new quote-unquote empowered survival narrative, then these shifts aren't just memory lapses. They're calculated revisions.
Exactly. It's if she's rewriting her narrative after the fact. And we have to ask how much of My Time to Stand is rooted in reality and how much is simply a reconstruction of what she feels happened. The inconsistency in her accounts of these crucial conversations raises serious questions about the authenticity of her story. And as we go into episode 2 here, we're going to look at how the media, Mike Stanfield and Christie Blanchard, all kind of helped shape this narrative that she was able to go forward with. Because if you watch and we were the first to release it, we put it out in its entirety, her actual interrogation. If you watch her interrogation video, not one time does she mention abuse from her mother. Not one time does she tell them that her mother was forcing her to be sick. In fact, if you look in the Waukesha case files, which we've recently been put out, you can see where she tells the responder who took her to the hospital that there's nothing wrong with her. And then he calls her on it because they already know her medical history, and she begins to backpedal with him as well. So she was not going for the abused victim, quote unquote, when she got arrested. That was not her narrative. That was a carefully crafted narrative between HBO, Mike Stanfield, Christie, and herself. And it only happened after the fact. It did not start out as this is what she was going to tell as her story. Otherwise, she would have given it to them in that moment. This was her first time to be able to tell the truth. And I sat on the edge of my fucking seat, just waiting for her to
Just say
finally
it.
say it.
Yeah.
And she didn't. And then Stan Hancock, the lead detective, gives her Nicholas on a silver freaking platter, and she just ran the fuck away with it.
Yes, she did, man. She focused on him,
She did
not her
as soon
mom.
as she
She
could.
kept saying,
And
my
you could,
mom's my best friend. I would never hurt my mom.
right,
I would
right. And
never hurt my mom.
you can see how she sets it up. And originally she was going for the he's my boyfriend and I didn't know he was going to do this. And oh my God, I can't believe it. Like, oh, he had this other incident that he was involved in. And oh, I hope he didn't do anything stupid again. I'll smack him upside his head. Oh yeah, he's got mental health problems. You're right. And I really did try to stop him. And he just needs to get the help that he needs. Oh my God. So
My
he's going to
God,
get the
I
help that he needs.
know.
Like,
Jesus.
girl. And then to add insult to injury, at the very end, Nicholas had no clue that he could ask for a fucking lawyer or any type of help, but she certainly freaking did. So, lawyer, and I am too sick to go to jail.
I know.
Oh, that was the final straw for me. Like, I saw that, and my whole opinion on the case changed, and I just couldn't unsee it. They all want to say that it's because, this or that, or all the different things that people accuse me of with the Blanchard family. Oh, they fired you. No, none of those things are true.
Uh-huh.
The veil dropped. I saw the veil drop. I couldn't unsee the veil drop. And Christie didn't like that I started asking her questions that pointed at her.
Right.
Her. Not about
Right.
Gypsy. She never cared what questions I asked about Gypsy. She took every opportunity to make Gypsy and Dee Dee look like fucking psychos. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But when I turned it on Christie and began to discuss the narrative that I felt she was pushing that was false, I became the enemy. And that was the beginning of the end. And I have never
You
looked
start
back.
to see through, it seems like, who they are. You
Mhm.
are pushed aside.
You are, and you're villainized immediately, just like they've
Mm-hmm.
done to Dee Dee and Rachel, her friend from prison, and other people involved in all of this. They've been doing this for years. Christie started this in 2015 in the Facebook groups, and if you weren't around back then, you've missed a whole lot
A
of
whole
shit.
lot. Yeah,
You
a
don't
lot.
have you don't have half a story, because everything that happened after the murder is just as important as what happened taking place up to the 23 years and the murder, because
Right.
it shows the cover up and the absolute villainy of all of this by everyone except for Dee Dee.
Right.
So, to wrap up this first episode, let's take a step back. Chapter 1 of My Time to Stand isn't merely the beginning of Gypsy's book. It's the foundation of a very carefully crafted narrative that reshapes public perception. It's a story where controlling the narrative seems to matter more than the truth. And for me, people may call me a flip-flopper because at one point in time I was supportive and now I'm not of Gypsy, as well as my thought processes on Nicholas. But my goal has always been one thing, and that was truth. So I don't see myself as a flip-flopper at all. I simply have been more and more and more informed with
Being
facts and
educated, there's
evidence.
a difference.
Yeah, there's a difference.
How many people think one thing and then learn something more about it and then decide, you know what, I was being ignorant,
Mm-hmm.
and now I've learned more
And
about
I've
it.
never hid that. Like, I've
Right.
always been very open about things, mistakes I made. That was what the whole first 3 books was about. It wasn't about putting the transcripts out there necessarily, because we could have done that in a different way. It was about making sure that people understood where we came from and where our beginnings of questioning things started and how
Right.
it
The
all
process,
kind of
right.
fell apart,
Your
and
thought
that's,
process, everything. Yeah.
yeah,
And if you listen to those, you will hear it. You read the books, even that you'll see it. I mean, the process was definitely back and forth, back and forth,
yeah.
back and forth, back and
And
forth. It
we
was
still
hard
struggle
not to.
today. We still struggle today. There's times where I feel complete compassion for Gypsy or complete compassion for Nick. And then I'll flip a page and I'm like, oh my God, these two are just diabolical.
And
Like,
plus, there's just so much. It's like, it's hard to retain it all.
yeah, it is.
It really is, because there is so much, which
Yeah.
is like we said before earlier, if you throw out enough things, The truth
If you
will
confuse
always
people
stay.
enough, no one will ever know what direction to look.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it reminds me of like questioning suspects that are in the same thing together, and you go from one to the next, and if they change up the story so much, there's no way for you to without concrete evidence, you don't know who's telling the truth, right? So it's
Right.
like, yeah, and this was not investigated, and now this, and I'm telling you, controlling the narrative is way more important to these people than the truth has ever been. I don't even think they know what the truth is anymore.
Right. And for me, the biggest red flag is Gypsy is already revising her story. She
Again,
talks about rewriting and revising. She's still shifting her narrative even after publication. Then that tells us one thing: truth isn't her priority. Controlling the narrative is her priority.
it's what we're going to keep unpacking in this podcast. Our next episode will dive into chapter 2, where Gypsy starts reconstructing her childhood, and we'll break down exactly what doesn't add up. But like you said, truth is not our priority here. And I want to bring you guys into, we touched on this for a moment, but there is a huge section, very pivotal section, that Miss I didn't proofread, but I recorded the whole freaking audiobook, has left out of her audiobook. And it is the section where she admits that she knows she's got this 1Q, 2-1Q micro deletion. She completely took that whole section out of her audio version, but left it in her printed version, and people caught that. And I think that she is using that and thinking, oh shit, they caught me, so now I have to do this again. When in all reality, all she has to do is say, you know what, I've lied a lot, and I don't know why I killed my mom. I was in a bad headspace, and I still am, and I need help. And everyone would be more willing to accept that version.
Would drop.
Let us hope.
Drop and be like, whoa, okay, how can we help?
Obviously,
for real,
we can't do anything about the fact that you're out here. We can't change that. We cannot change the justice system and how they've dropped the ball on this. The only thing we can do is hope that that she learns in some way, that she moves on from this, and that she does eventually make the changes she needs to make, or realize the things she needs to make before she ruins her daughter's life in the same way. And the generational trauma will continue.
Yes.
So
right.
We're going to dive into chapter 2, where Gypsy does start to reconstruct her childhood, and we're going to tell you everything that's not adding up. Because if chapter 1 was about laying the groundwork for a rewritten history, chapter 2 is where the real contradictions begin to stack up.
That's right. So stay tuned. Gathering of the Crows is just getting started. For more insights, head over to thegoodwivesnetwork.com, where you can find all our Gypsy content and so much more.
If you'd like ad-free early access to our episodes and exclusive investigative information, join our Patreon membership at patreon.com/goodwivesnet. And don't forget to grab your signed or unsigned copies of the first 3 books, available now on our website and Amazon. Be on the lookout for our most jaw-dropping book yet, Creating a Narrative: How Gypsy Rose, the Murderer, and Her Con Artist Family Rewrote the Truth in the Murder of Dee Blanchard. Pre-orders are coming soon, and let me tell you, this first part, it's going to be a 2-parter, and this first one is, oh my goodness, it is breaking down every single lie she has told from start to finish, and every lie that they've all told from start to finish.
That's right.
Looking back across 2015 all the way to present day.
And we'll be right here to call out every inconsistency as we peel back the layers of this case. So thanks for tuning in and dishing true crime with the good. Forget to subscribe. Follow us on social media using the hashtag #UnmaskTheNarrative. And check our website for details on upcoming live events and vigil sessions honoring Dee Blanchard.
Have a good one from The Good Wives, serving up true crime, one dish at a time. Bye, guys.